the New York Giants. Is it a potential breakout year for Daniel Jones? We'll preview their offseason right now. So I was surprised by this. They only have $6 million in cap space. So even though they have a quarterback on a rookie deal, they don't have much to work with in free agency, but they have some potential cuts. Nate Soldier is one of them. They can cut him and save $6 million a year. Kevin Zeitler would save $12 million. That's huge, but he's actually a really good player, so that would make it tough to do that. Levine Tololo, I think that's his name, is $3 billion. He would save $3 million. And this might be a surprise cut, but Jabril Peppers, I mean, if they were to cut him, they'd save $6 million. And do they really need Jabril when they have Xavier McKinney, a safety they drafted, Logan Ryan playing safety, another guy in Julian Love who he plays corner but can play safety as well? It just seems for me that if they want to, because they have two big-time free agents, Leonard Williams and Dalvin Tomlinson. Is it worth keeping Jabril if you can't keep both Leonard and Dalvin Tomlinson? I don't think it is. You know, in my dream offseason for the Giants, I want them to keep Leonard Williams and Dalvin Tomlinson. So I wouldn't be surprised with cutting Jabril. But if the Giants were to cut everybody but Jabril Peppers, they'd have $26 million in cap space. If they were to cut Jabril, they'd have $32 million in cap space. And I think $32 million is enough to re-sign Leonard Williams and Dalvin Tomlinson. So I think that would make sense. But
did they release Golden Tate already?
Yeah, they did.
Okay. I wanted to make sure I read that right.
So they're pending free agents. Leonard Williams is one, Kyler Fackrell, Cameron Fleming, Dalvin Tomlinson, Jabal Sheard, and all of the running backs outside of Saquon are free agents. Wayne Gallman, Deion Lewis, Devontae Freeman, and Alfred Morris. I mean, in my opinion, I just want them to bring back Leonard Williams and Dalvin Tomlinson and maybe Cameron Fleming for some offensive line depth, but that's about it.
Yeah, I think that Leonard Williams is the guy they definitely have to bring back. He was so big for that team last year and has really exploded onto the scene for them after struggling with the Jets the last couple of years he was there. I think the change of scenery was big for him. He was a huge part of that defense. I would lean towards keeping Cam Fleming. I would love to keep Dalvin Tomlinson too, but if it came down to those two guys, I think I would go with Fleming over Tomlinson just because I think that defensive line is a little bit more set than the offensive line, and I would prioritize keeping that offensive line as familiar as possible. They got better as the season went on last year. I think keeping that familiarity would be good, and as much as I wouldn't want to lose Tomlinson, I think they're in a better position to lose him on that defensive line than they are to lose Fleming on the offensive line.
So the positions of need, I think they need a center, they need a tackle, and they need a number one wide receiver because right now they have number twos, but they don't have a number one. So they don't have the cap space to target a number one. So they're going to have to get that position in the draft. But in terms of center, Ted Karras is a guy, maybe Austin Reiter, and at tackle, Matt Filer, or maybe a reunion with Mike Remmers, even though Mike Remmers was pretty bad with the Giants. Then at guard, maybe Kelechi Osemele, G.J. Fluker, or a guy who recently got released, and Gabe Jackson from the Raiders. He could be a huge addition. But honestly, with their cap situation, it's going to be hard to target any of these free agents. It just seems like the team that they had last year is a team they're going to have this upcoming season. They're not going to make much improvements.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. With the money, it's going to be really tough to add anybody big time. I think the draft is going to be the big move for them. At center, a guy I was thinking was Alex Mack, but I think they're going to have a tough time adding anybody substantial in free agency just because, like, the big position that you would want to splash at, I think, for them this offseason would be wide receiver, and I don't think money-wise they'll be able to be in on even, like, a Curtis Samuel because I think he could get bigger money from a team like Washington, who has great cap space and has just as much of a need, if not more, for a guy like Samuel. So I think the draft is going to be the place where the Giants make their bread and butter this season.
So in the draft, they have the 11th overall pick. Wide receivers, I think they could target Jalen Waddle. Maybe if Devontae Smith falls there. Terrace Marshall Jr. is too high for me. That's more the second. Maybe Tutu Atwell in a second or Elijah Moore in the second, and maybe in the later rounds, Tamarion Terry could be a target. Offensive line, Elijah Vera Tucker, Christian Darrisaw, Rashawn Slater, Sam Cosmi, Tevin Jenkins. These are all guys they can target. For me, I think they have to go offensive line. I know that a number one receiver is a priority, but I think some offensive line depth is even more of a priority. I mean, right now, they don't have much. If Kevin Zeitler gets cut, which might be possible, because if they don't have a trade partner, he's probably going to get cut. They don't have any guards. Will Hernandez is average at best. Shane LeMahieu was pretty bad last season. He started about 9 games, I believe, but he wasn't anything special. Andrew Thomas flashed late in the season, so I think you're okay at tackle. And Cameron Fleming, he's a free agent, so if he's not back, who's going to be the right tackle? And at center, Nick Gates, do you want him to be your longtime center? I just think they need to get an offensive lineman, and in my opinion, that guy is Elijah Vera Tucker, because Christian Darrisaw, I like him. Rashawn Slater, I don't think he'll be there, but Elijah Vera Tucker, I like him more than Darrisaw because Vera Tucker can play guard and he can play tackle. He has feet like a tackle, so he's more of a tackle, and that added versatility just makes him more of an option at that 11th overall pick because I think he's the best value. He's the best bang for your buck at number 11.
I was thinking the same thing. If you want to go offensive line, you could. Darrisaw, Slater, Elijah Vera Tucker, one of those three, if not 2 or 3 of those 3 will be there at 11. But you could also go with a weapon at 11, whether it's Smith, Waddle. I don't think Chase will be there. I think Chase is going to be the first wide receiver off the board. But one of those 3 guys, or Kyle Pitts might also be there at 11. I know they have Evan Ingram, but I've read people saying that Kyle Pitts is projecting to be more of a wide receiver at the NFL level than a tight end, or at least a wide receiver in a tight end's body. So I don't think it would be a bad pick at all to get him at 11. I think you could play him and Ingram at the same time. So, if they wanted to go weapon, there are more than enough options at that 11th overall pick. And there's more later in the draft, too. Amon-Ra St. Brown is another guy I was thinking of. Chris Olave is a guy later on they could target. Dwayne Eskridge later on in the draft, going deep into the draft. So they could go weapon with the 11th pick, but I think it makes more sense to go offensive line there and target wide receiver later on because this is a deep wide receiver draft.
Yeah, maybe center later on too. Quinn Miners, Landon Dickerson, Creed Humphrey, Josh Myers. Those are some options. 3 of those guys, probably all 4, will not be picked in the first round.
Yeah.
They'll be second round and further picks. So I think they also need to get a center. Nick Gates is okay, but I think they can use an upgrade. Then I think they need an inside linebacker to complement Blake Martinez. I think Jamin Davis, I'm really high on Jamin Davis. If they can get him in the 3rd round, I'd be okay with it. Maybe in the 4th, but I wouldn't spend a top 3 round pick on an inside linebacker. But then I think also cornerback. They need another cornerback. Tyson Campbell, Greg Newsome II, Kelvin Joseph out of Kentucky, Eric Stokes, Paulson Adebo, I think that's his name, Adebo,
yeah,
and Asante Samuel Jr. These are all guys you can target, but for me, the priority in this draft is to get offensive lineman, receiver. Then you look at defense, but I think it's all about getting a lineman and then receiver and then everything else.
They could also look potentially edge later on in the draft. Carlos Basham and Quincy Roche are guys they could look at later on. But I agree, offense is the main priority in the draft. They'll be able to get great options at 2 positions of need at 11. And then even later on in the draft, I think offensive line and wide receiver, this is the draft to be in if those are your 2 holes. And I think they'll have a good chance of filling those 2 holes with some viable options to start next year and make an impact from day one.
So my dream draft for the Giants is to draft Elijah Vera Tucker at 11, in the 2nd round, Landon Dickerson, then Eric Stokes later, then Tamarion Terry later in the draft because I think he has a really high upside. And my depth chart for them would be on offense: Daniel Jones, Saquon, Sterling Shepard, Darius Slayton, Dante Pettis, Evan Ingram, Andrew Thomas, Will Hernandez, Landon Dickerson / Nick Gates, Elijah Vera Tucker at the other guard spot, and then at tackle, Mike Remmers / Matt Filer or / Cameron Fleming could be that tackle spot, or Vera Tucker can play tackle there. It really depends. But then on defense, I have them having Dexter Lawrence, Dalvin Tomlinson, Leonard Williams. In my offseason, I want to keep both of them. So I'm going to re-sign both of them. Lorenzo Carter, Blake Martinez, O'Shane Jimenez, James Bradbury, Eric Stokes, Julian Love, Logan Ryan, and Xavier McKinney. In my offseason, I have them cutting Jabril Peppers, which I know is a hot subject because he is a really good player, but I think them drafting Xavier McKinney makes Jabril expendable. So because of that, I think it would be a wise financial move to do it, but I don't think they will cut Jabril, so Jabril can easily be slotted here, and this is pretty much the same team. You know, the Giants just really have to hope that Daniel Jones breaks out in his third year and is more comfortable with Jason Garrett, because this team is not getting much better because they don't have much cap space to do so.
I'll say getting Saquon back I think will be a huge help if he can come back as the same guy. Getting a receiver in the draft, because they certainly will do that, will be a huge help. And staying healthy, hopefully for them, knock on wood, would be a huge help because injuries really derailed them last season. I think it hurt Daniel Jones' development. And he still showed some signs late in the season that he was at least improving a little bit, especially in that turnover battle. He still had issues with it towards the end of the year, but he got better. And that's going to be the main key for him is the turnovers. Can he cut down on the turnovers? If he can, I think he could be a solid option for them for the next decade, but it's all about cutting down the turnovers. I think having those weapons will help him. And if they hit this offseason, they could be in the race for the NFC East next year.